I'm going to talk to you today about checkpoint inhibition and glioblastoma. I think this was briefly discussed earlier in the context of prior failures. And unfortunately, there have been many prior failures, as Charles indicated in his talk. But I think there's also some opportunities. And I want to confirm, is the echo gone and can you hear me better now?
Echo's gone. We can hear you better, but the closer you can be to the microphone, the better.
Okay. Um,
That's pretty
All
good.
right. So I have a couple of disclosures. SpringWorks Therapeutics, Alexion, and Servier have consulting engagements with all of them. So checkpoint inhibition refers to the concept of these molecules that sit on the surface of T cell receptors. T cell receptors are, as we know, the principal mediators of the adaptive immune system response. Um, and overexpressed on um, T cells are immune checkpoint receptors, which block T cell anti-tumor activity. And tumors cause overexpression of these cells in order to essentially turn off the adaptive immune system and and hide themselves from the immune system. So there's a couple that are famous, specifically CTLA4, PD1, and then LAG3, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So we've completed, as referenced earlier, a number of major trials in glioblastoma with checkpoint inhibition, specifically Checkmate 143, which was a phase 3 trial in recurrent GBM of Nivo versus Avastin that showed no benefit, followed by Checkpoint 598. That was in newly diagnosed glioblastoma with MGMT methylation. Again, no benefit. Followed by Checkpoint 498. Again, phase 3 newly diagnosed unmethylated glioblastoma. In this trial, treatment was with radiation and nivolumab without without temozolomide versus standard of care. And in this case, actually, the patients who did not get Temodar did worse, despite the fact that their tumors were not methylated. So this would suggest that even maybe in unmethylated tumors, there's some benefit to chemotherapy. And then a similar result was found in NRG BN007. This was the same patient population, but dual checkpoint inhibition with IPI and Nivo. And again, patients who were on immunotherapy did worse than unmethylated patients receiving standard of care chemotherapy, including the Optune, sorry, not the Optune device, including Temodar. Interestingly, most of these trials did not include the Optune device. One of them did, but only had two patients. So basically, Optune is not factored into these data. So that's terrible. And there was a lot of sort of hand-wringing. And then people started to ask, well, are there biomarkers? Are there ways that we could predict which patients would benefit from these treatments? And if so, what are those? People thought about tumor mutational burden, um, which is present in about 16% of glioblastomas, are TMB high. In most of these cases are due to either deficient mismatch repair or are induced by prior treatment with Temodar. There is a tumor agnostic FDA approval for TMB high tumors to use Keytruda. However, this was based on a basket trial that included zero glioblastomas. And in fact, the meta-analyses have failed to find an association between TMB high glioblastomas and checkpoint inhibitor response. Similarly, the data for PDL1 are very mixed. One trial showed that maybe you do have some responders in the PDL1 high subgroup, but two other studies showed the opposite. Um, Polymerase E deficiency is accounts for sort of a subset of TMB high tumors. And there's, at least one trial that sort of suggests that patients responding to checkpoint inhibitor might be more likely to have this mutation. But these are all small, retrospective, correlative trials, so very low level of evidence. Um, Again, similar thing with DNA replication stress. And the one I want to highlight is MAP kinase activation. This one is kind of interesting. So, in the recurrent setting, glioblastoma patients that seem to respond to checkpoint inhibition were enriched in BRAF mutations or fusions or PTP and 11 activating mutations with a pretty significant odds ratio. However, this only really occurs in 2 to 3% of GBMs. Um, and there's this thought that maybe what we ought to be doing is trying to identify the tumors with activation of MAP kinase signaling using a downstream, readout, something like phospho work. However, there's no CLIA certified assay for this or commercially available assay for this. So that's a deficiency. So overall, immune checkpoint inhibition in glioblastoma has failed. There's, some vague ideas about, subselection, but ultimately this has not gone anywhere until recently, until people started thinking about it a little bit differently. So what if it's not about, um, intrinsic tumor factors? What if it's a combination therapy that might actually make this work? So specifically, tumor treating fields, which are independently approved for glioblastoma based on the EF14 trial that showed significant improvement in overall survival for patients that used tumor treating fields in addition to standard of care treatment. Um, Tumor treating fields have recently also been found to affect the nuclear membrane, and specifically, they permeabilize the nuclear membrane and in doing so cause leakage of components inside the nucleus, which are inflammatory. So on the left, you can see a bunch of nuclei, and you can see on the left column is not treated, the right column is tumor treated fields. And if you just look at the bottom panels, you can see pretty clearly that the nuclear membrane is disrupted in the cells that have been treated with tumor treating fields. There's blebbing that you can see of the membrane. And indeed, that does result in activation of the inflammasome as seen on the right. So this also downstream of that activation leads to activation of caspase-1 in these same cells. These are glioma stem cells. And this is a nice paper where they did a really nice dive into the mechanism by which this effect comes to be, but essentially it is dependent on a couple of characterized proteins called absent in melanoma 2.1 and 2.2. And really, if either one of those is knocked down, in this case with short hairpin RNA loops, it does not work. And here you can see on the right, again, activation of caspase-1. So if you treat tumor treating fields, if you treat glioma stem cells in the presence of tumor treating fields, you have permeabilization of the nuclear membrane, you have blebbing of the nuclear membrane, leakage of components out into the cytosol that then activate the inflammasome and also activate caspase. But then the really interesting thing is, if you take glioma cells and you treat them, and then you take the media that they were treated in and put spleen cells into that media, you can actually see that they have secreted cytokines that then subsequently stimulate dendritic cells, lymphocytes, monocytes, which were never exposed to the tumor treating field. So there is a secreted factor. And this just shows you all the different types of cells that you might find from a spleen sample. But the take-home message is that there's a cell intrinsic process and that there's also a secreted paracrine process. So what happens if you do this in mice? So here, I thought it was more helpful to just look at the table, honestly, than the plot. What you're seeing is two different types of glioma stem cells that have been implanted into mice. The experiments are parallel, essentially. And what you're doing is you're treating with tumor treating fields or not treating. And then some of the mice have dual knockdown of those two proteins I mentioned, AIM1 and AIM2. And essentially, what they're saying is if the mechanism is intact, you have 10 out of 15 mice treated with tumor treating fields alive on day 100. And that's a pretty good result. By contrast, if you don't treat them, you have 1 out of 12 cells alive. Okay. Even more interesting, if you re-challenge naive cells with a second dose of tumor cells, um, 0 out of 12 are going to be alive on day 12. Versus if you re-challenge previously treated cells with a second implantation of tumor, 6 out of 10 are still alive at day 100. And you really get pretty similar results across both glioma stem cell lines. So this basically tells you that you are achieving prolonged survival through an adaptive immune mechanism, which is durable. And that's kind of, the holy grail of cancer treatment these days. So what about in humans? We have a phase 2 study called To the Top. It was a single arm study of 26 patients with newly diagnosed glioblastoma. It was compared to external controls from the EF41 study. EF14 study. That was the study that validated tumor treating fields in glioblastoma. And I'll point out that this was a subset of patients that probably would not be expected to do so well. 54% had biopsy only or partial resection. 73% had unmethylated glioblastoma, MGMT. So that's more than you'd expect. And, concordant with that, if you look at the control, the historical external control, you had a 2-year survival of 12%. But with adjuvant addition of pembrolizumab starting in cycle 2, you had a 2-year survival of 52%. So that's a big difference. And then even if you look at overall response rates, you had a 40% overall response rate. So both of those numbers would be considered very positive results. So based on that, we now are running the phase 3 randomized double-blinded control study, EF41, which is essentially the same protocol, except the only differences are we're starting Keytruda in the first adjuvant cycle, and there is a placebo control. Randomization is 2-to-1 in favor of the study drug, and it is enrolling very briskly. I think that we'll have a readout in the next couple years. So that's very exciting. And I want to highlight one other thing that we're doing in the checkpoint inhibitor space, which is a little novel. So LAG3 or lymphocyte activation gene 3 is a gene that's not expressed on naive T cells, but when they are activated, it becomes upregulated, and it essentially serves to limit activation. So Neffy, if you're in the audience, it's much like a cannabinoid. It's a circuit breaker mechanism. But so it wants to limit the activation, and what it does is it binds with MHC2 in antigen promoter cells and overall just decreases proliferation and increases tolerance. So LAG3 expression is a limiter of the expansion of the activated pool of T cells and the size of the memory pool, and therefore governs T cell exhaustion by a distinct mechanism from PD-1. And there's been a lot of interest in combination therapy. I won't go into that too much, but I will tell you that there has also been really interesting findings from TCGA showing that uh, above 90% of glioblastoma samples show that the internal lymphocytes show LAG3 expression. Now, that's actually much, much higher than you see with PD-1 or CTLA-4. And those are the only two targets we've tested so far for checkpoint inhibition. So there's been interest in this, and a phase one study did show, first of all, safety in combination with nivolumab. So this is LAG-3 PD-1 dual inhibition. And they also found a 12-month overall survival of 54%, which was more than double the, historical external control. For what that's worth, I know there's a lot of issues with external controls. But this was enough to motivate people to open a phase two study of relatlimab, which is a LAG-3 monoclonal antibody inhibitor, and Nivo versus lomustine for GBM at first recurrence. And I'm excited to say that we will have this trial open at Swedish in the next month. So my takeaways from this brief talk, I hope I've just kind of oriented you to the state of checkpoint inhibitor therapy in glioblastoma as it stands today. But it seems to me like we would really benefit from having a CLIA-validated assay for PERK in order to stratify tumors as MAP kinase activated or not. I think it's going to be much more useful to do that than to try to find every possible mutation and interpret every possible mutation. I think a downstream assay is preferable. And then I'll point out that there's really strong preclinical and early clinical data to suggest the addition of Keytruda to standard of care with the Optune device for newly diagnosed glioblastoma. And we will be very interested to get the readout for EF41. And then should we be thinking ahead, should we be thinking ahead to combination of tumor treating fields plus PD-L1 inhibition plus LAG-3 inhibition? Should we be thinking ahead to combination therapy? That's another really interesting question. And I think my final take home is I just hope very much that these data will encourage people to stop excluding tumor treating fields from immunotherapy trials because there may be a very important synergy there that we are overlooking. Okay.
Alipi, thanks so much. That was a great talk, bringing up a very important concept about TTF plus immunotherapy, and appreciate you staying home, being sick, and doing doing it remotely. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Bonham?